a number of serious challenges. The climate crisis is worsening and widening. Across the world, billions of people are affected by underdevelopment, inequality, poverty, hunger, as well as massive unemployment. So the outlook for global economic growth remains subdued, as we have often heard from global bodies such as the IMF and the World Bank. And many economies carry the burden of unsustainable levels of debt, particularly in the global south and on our own continent, Africa as well. The geopolitical instability, conflicts, and wars are causing further hardships, as well as suffering. This is all happening at a time of great technological advancement and change, which also represents an opportunity and a threat. While the challenges we face are common causes, or rather have common causes, and consequences are unevenly distributed across the world, working together with the G20 members and building partnerships that are essential to resolving these problems, South Africa will seek to harness global commitment and capabilities to confront the challenges that the world faces. We all seek to achieve more rapid, inclusive, and economic growth. That, in many ways, is what informs what we need to do as the G20 countries. We all seek a more just and equal world, and a world in which poverty and hunger are eradicated and made history. All of us seek to avert the worst effects of climate change and its devastating impacts, and particularly on the poor who live in underdeveloped countries. The G20 therefore provides us with a platform to pursue these collective goals. South Africa has adopted the theme, as you have heard, solidarity, equality, and sustainability for its G20 presidency. Through solidarity, we can create an inclusive future that will advance the interests of people at the greatest risk of being left behind. This is important in an interconnected world, particularly where the challenges faced by one nation also affects other nations. The disparities in wealth as well as development within and between these countries, we all know is unjust, unsustainable, and undesirable. By promoting equality, we will want the G20 to strive to ensure fair treatment and equal opportunities for all individuals and all nations in the world. And we aim to break down the divisions of economic status, the divisions of gender, of race, geography, and any other characteristics that divides people. Sustainability involves meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And in line with our theme, we will seek to strengthen and advance the international effort to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. South Africa's presidency of the G20 will be the first time for an African country to preside over this most important body of the G20. We will use this moment to bring development priorities of the African continent, and more broadly the Global South more firmly onto the agenda of the G20. In this regard, we will build on the work of the most recent G20 presidencies of Brazil in 2024, of India in 2023, and of Indonesia, which also happened in 2022. We will use our G20 presidency to secure urgent progress on shared goals through the number of priority actions that we have identified. First, we must take action to strengthen disaster resilience, and this has to do with the actions that we will seek the G20 to address when it comes to climate change, so that we just go beyond talking about climate change and begin to address the damage that is caused as climate change devastates countries, economies, and the lives of ordinary people. The increasing rate of climate-induced natural disasters is affecting many countries around the world, with a devastating impact of those countries that cannot afford the costs of recovery as well as rebuilding. We will elevate this issue to the leader level, calling for the global community, including the international financing institutions, as well as the development banks and the private sector, to scale up on post-disaster reconstruction. Second, we must take action to ensure debt sustainability for your low-income countries. A key obstacle to inclusive growth is in developing economies, including in our own African countries, is an unsustainable level of debt which continues to limit their ability to invest in infrastructure, in healthcare, in education, and other development needs of their people. Building on G20 initiatives undertaken in recent years, we will seek to advance sustainable solutions to tackle high structural deficits and liquidity challenges and extend debt relief to developing economies that are struggling under the burden of debt. We will also seek to address the issue of sovereign wealth, sovereign credit ratings, and fair and transparent processes to address high-risk premiums for developing economies. Third, we must mobilize finance for a just energy transition. We will seek to secure agreement on increasing the quality and quantity of climate finance flows to developing economies. This would include strengthening multilateral development banks and enhancing and streamlining support for country platforms such as the Just Energy Transition, which we call the JET, and more effectively leveraging private capital. Fourth, we must work together to harness critical minerals for inclusive growth and development as well. As minerals extraction accelerates in a number of countries to match the needs of the energy transition, it is crucial to ensure that the countries and local economies that are endowed with these resources are the ones that benefit the most. We will use this G20 to champion the use of critical minerals as an engine of growth and for the development of our continent, as our continent is rich and richly endowed with these critical minerals. South Africa's G20 will pursue progress on cross-cutting issues through the establishment of 3 dedicated task forces. The first task force is inclusive growth at the economic level, industrialization, employment, and reduced inequality. The second task will deal with food security, and the third with artificial intelligence, data governance, and innovation for sustainable development. It is critical for South Africa that the G20 remains focused on its core responsibilities to address global economic and financial challenges that face the world. It should not replace existing international institutions, as well as platforms such as the United Nations and various associated bodies. At the same time, G20 initiatives should in the main support, not diminish, the responsibilities that countries have to deliver on sustainable development goals, on climate action and other commitments that they make in various forums. To ensure that the G20 remains focused, South Africa will not create any new working groups or permanent structures. We will build on the previous presidencies and provide momentum to existing structures and processes. We will reflect on the impact of the G20 over the last 20 years and positioning that the G20 has taken to enhance its impact over the next 20-year cycle. We will balance an ambitious developmental agenda against the need to achieve sufficient consensus on key issues. It is important for South Africa that our G20 presidency is seen as inclusive. Dialogue with civil society and other non-governmental organizations will be conducted through various engagement groups. And these engagement groups are organized according to sectors such as business, labor, civil society, parliamentary bodies, as well as the judiciary. These engagement groups will also include scientific bodies, think tanks, audit institutions, as well as institutions of higher learning like universities, and specific groups of women and youth matters, including issues that have to do with disability, and yes, be able to address vulnerable groups such as the LGBTQIA+ communities. South Africa intends to support the creation of new engagement groups that will deal with some of the key existential issues that impact on the economies of various countries. This will highlight the creative, cultural, financial, and innovative capacities that our own country has to give when it comes to small and medium enterprises as well as cooperatives, and also how these operate in rural areas as well as in the townships where our people live. Following the approach of the Brazilian presidency, a G20 social forum will be convened. This will bring together representatives of the existing engagement groups and other segments of civil society. South Africa firmly believes that civil society, in the end, serves a bridge between the G20 leaders and the people who have the greatest interest in its deliberations. So South Africa's presidency will culminate in the G20 Presidency Leaders Summit, which will take place here in Johannesburg, not here in Johannesburg, in Johannesburg, up north, in November 2025. This will bring together the leaders of the G20 countries, African Union, European Union, and also those who will have been invited. The Leaders Summit will deliberate on critical issues arising from the various working groups and task forces and initiatives and engagements that will have been taking place through the course of the year. So the Leaders Summit will adopt, in the end, a declaration reflecting the collective views of the G20 countries and the common actions they will need to take to address the most important challenges facing the world today. So through this presidency, South Africa has a valuable opportunity to advance efforts towards greater global economic growth and sustainable development. It also has an important role to play in bringing to bear to the table for full discussion issues that will matter most or that matter most to our own continent and to the global south. But it also gives us an opportunity collectively as South Africans to have an influence on some of the development trajectories that we would like to see in the world. Over the course of the year, there will be more than 130 meetings that will be held in our country, in all our provinces. Tens of thousands of people from nearly 30 countries and representatives from over 20 regional and international bodies will arrive in our country over the course of our G20 presidency. So the G20 presidency, therefore, is an opportunity to present to the world the great opportunities and experiences that South Africa has to offer. That is why we have dubbed this the G20 of the people of South Africa, as we want the people of South Africa to embrace this whole process of the G20 as theirs and to get involved in ways that will enhance our participation and our leadership of the G20. The social summit that was held in Brazil involved some 47,000 people participating in a number of iterations. We may be a much smaller population size than Brazil, but if they could do 47,000, I do believe that we can also do 47,000 and more, because we have a civil society that is very active, very inquisitive, very, very intelligent, and very noisy. So we would like them to get involved in this whole process. And I'm sure through all of you who are gathered here, as also members of civil society, and having all these wonderful ideas, you will also want, well, let me not say want, I will want you to participate. That is a forum that we have created so that we can hear your views and not always just hear your questions, but hear your views as well. We look forward to welcoming our friends and partners from all over the world to our beautiful country. Through South Africa's G20 presidency, we will work to build a better Africa and a better world, and to ensure that no one is left behind. the two ministers who are sitting up front here, Minister Enoch Godongwan, the Minister of Finance, and Minister Ronald Lamula, the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, will be leading our G20 process. On their shoulders will rest the responsibility of making our G20 successful. And I know for sure, through the very capable execution of task of principally the three departments in government, the Presidency, as led by Director General Baleni in the Presidency, as well as DERCO, as well as Treasury, we will be able to present a most impressive G20. As we have gone around the other G20s, we have learned a great deal. And they have gone there with their eyes wide open to see what they can learn, as they know that this is a great moment for South Africa. We will be having easily more than 40 or so heads of states coming to South Africa all at the same time, as well as their various ministers and officials. So 2025 is going to be a very busy year for us as South Africa. And I would like to call on all of us to work together and to make this a most successful G20. Where government falters and where there are areas where we can do better, I would like to hear views and suggestions from as many South Africans as possible. So this is the launch, therefore, of our G20, and we say with open arms we welcome the world to come to South Africa, and let the games begin. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Unfortunately, Mr. President, I'd like to keep you on that podium for the Q&A, but I'll let you just have a sip of water before we commence with the Q&A. While the President is taking a breather and having a sip of water, I would just like to acknowledge the two sous shepherds who are supporting our G20 shepherd. And our G20 shepherd is the DG of International Relations and Cooperation, which is Dango. The two sous shepherds are the advocate Nokukanya Jele, who is the special advisor to the President on international relations matters, as well as legal matters. She works alongside Ambassador Mapongo, who is our guru when it comes to multilateral issues and platforms, and they both supporting DG Daniel. And that's where most of the hard work happens in the G20. The Sherpas and the sous Sherpas do the hardest part of the G20, the part that is never visible to cameras and for all of us to see. So, colleagues, you are welcome, and thank you for making the time to join us. So at this stage, we will now commence with the question and answer session. And as the President has indicated, if you feel you don't want to ask a question, you'd rather give him an idea or a view on the G20, please feel free to do that. As I indicated earlier on, colleagues, we are constrained in terms of time because of the Binational Commission with Nigeria that the President is co-chairing. So if we could just please be courteous and stick to one question so that as many of you will be able to pose questions and pose ideas to the President. Also feel free to pose questions to the ministers who are here. The President will not take offense if you ask them questions. So, Mr. President, I will invite you to the podium again as I point to our veteran newsmen who will have the first bite of the questions, Peter Fabricius. Before Peter starts, if we can just introduce ourselves, even though we know some of you. Just introduce yourself and the media house you represent, and then go ahead and pose your questions. So, Peter?
Thanks, Vincent. Peter Fabricius, Daily Maverick. Mr. President, you spelled out here how South Africa will be building on what has been a kind of developmental G20 agenda from Indonesia, India, Brazil, and now South Africa. Are you not concerned, though, that you will be followed by the United States of America under a president who's not terribly developmentally oriented, shall we say, and that may disrupt your agenda both during the year and also when you hope to bequeath an agenda to the next G20 presidency, which will be that of the United States? Thank you.
Thank you. We will now take another one. Zianda?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just following on from Peter Fabricius, in terms of any concerns that you might be having from a trade perspective, you've already been speaking quite a bit about the fact that the G20, it constitutes 75% of the world's GDP, and perhaps then Minister Inokorongwana can also weigh in on this. Do you have any concerns about even bilateral agreements with countries such as the United States? But also linked to that, you've mentioned in your remarks about geopolitical tensions, and I've spoken to your spokesperson this morning about whether you have any concerns about the ICJ case, I beg your pardon, and other issues that South Africa is taking on, impacting your ability to influence the agenda of the G20 during this presidency. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Zianda. We'll take one last one before the President steps to the podium. Let's switch off that mic and let's handle that roving mic, please. Because that mic has interference in it. So you can just bring the roving mic, please. Thank you.
Good morning, Lisa Isaacs from Radio 786. So, Honorable President, South Africa has amazing youth intelligence from our universities across the tertiary education sector. And I wanted to know, seeing that South Africa is going to be the first African country to head up the position, will you see a prioritization of African intelligence from African universities to help the global South improve, instead of relying on Western institutions, instead, in-source from our union country? Thank you.
Thank you. President will take this.
Thank you very much. Peter, I would like to say that we take over the presidency of the G20 from India, which took over from Indonesia. And the strength of the G20 really is that each declaration that encompasses the outcomes of discussions in the various working groups builds on previous declarations. And you will find that even the declaration from the Indonesian G20 built on what was also discussed in Japan, and that presents a body of information, a body of precedent that the G20 hardly really ever deviates from. You will have heard me say we are going to seek to conduct a review of the past G20s. We said as much when we accepted the presidency of the G20, and in that review we will seek to, on a theme-by-theme basis, review the decisions that were taken on climate change, on global trade, on human rights, and on a whole range of issues, and try to track the logic and the thinking throughout the years And what we have found is that there has always been a forward movement, and there's always been progress that has been made as the G20 has had to deal with existential issues that affect various parts of the world. So I'm least concerned about how our own G20 will be seen, and I don't believe that what will have been decided here will be diluted. And in fact, as we work with the United States in the Troika being composed of the past president of the G20, India, yes, at the moment it's been India, Brazil, and ourselves, and now it will be Brazil, South Africa, and the United States, and we will stay in the Troika for 2 years as the United States and the forthcoming nation then leads the G20. So all the wonderful decisions will rub off on those who will follow, and we will be able, through the various working groups, through our Sherpas and Sherpas, be able to remind everyone the decisions that have been taken. So I see very little room for any major break with what the G20 will have concluded. And one of the processes that is evolving is that we will seek to get sufficient consensus on decisions that need to be taken by the G20. So I think there will be sufficient shock absorbers that will be put in place to enable the G20 to continue to function in a way that will advance the interests of the world. And remember, through the G20, we are not advancing the interests of one single country. We are advancing the interests of the people of the world, collectively represented in the G20. Zianda, you want to know whether our participation, if I got you right, but I think the one that I got right was the issue of the ICJ, whether our having launched a case at the ICJ level will have an impact. I do not believe it will have an impact. Everybody knows what South Africa's stance has been on a number of issues, ranging from the ICJ and our stance on the question of Israel and Palestine, also on our stance on the wars that continue to take place in the world, that we are a peace-loving country, but also have taken up the role of being a peacemaker where we can, and coming forward, working with others, and working with various other institutions in the world, particularly continental as well as global institutions such as the UN as well as the African Union, that we work for peace. And we do this through the neutrality position that we have adopted as members of the non-aligned movement. And that in many ways has given us quite a lot of leverage, because in various conflicts we have been able to talk to both sides, much as it has tended to upset others. But when they fully realize the role that we play, they appreciate South Africa's role in various troublesome conflicts. And so therefore, the bilateral agreements that we have, particularly, say, for instance, AGOA, we see ourselves continuing to participate in that, largely also because it's a mutually beneficial trade deal. We benefit, and on the other side, the country that has signed up to this to give African countries free trade entry also benefits. So I hardly think that one will want to cut one's nose to spite one's face. So I see this as mutually beneficial. Then my sister Isaacs, I didn't get the first name, wants to know whether we will prioritize, for instance, the participation of bodies such as universities. In fact, I have expressed my deep desire to meet with all vice-chancellors of universities, all our universities, just to mobilize them to get involved in the G20 processes. They are a reservoir of extremely clever people, people who are creative, people who can come up with a lot of ideas in the various areas that the G20 presidency of South Africa is going to participate in. And I'd like to bring their intellectual prowess to bear to enhance our own G20 presidency. So I will want them through their various institutions, either intelligence, artificial intelligence, or technology, or science, or whatever, to participate in the G20. So I've expressed to the Minister of Higher Education that I want to meet all our vice-chancellors so that they immediately should start thinking about the contribution that they can make to enhance the interests of our country when it comes to areas of their own speciality, given the themes that we have committed ourselves to addressing, including the priorities that we have set out as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll take another round of 3